Dear students, let's continue the topic direct speech and indirect speech. In the previous class, we learned how do we change assertive sentences into indirect speech. Today, let us discuss how do we change interrogative sentences into indirect speech. We have certain rules to be followed. First, remove the comma, quotation marks and question marks when we write the indirect speech. Second, interrogative form has to be changed into assertive form. So what is the interrogative form? As we already know, the interrogative sentences are two types, WH questions and yes or no questions. WH questions start with what, which, where, when, how, etc. And yes or no questions starting with the auxiliary verbs like is, are, was, were, do, does, did, etc. So in all these forms, the sentence is formed in a different way from that of a normal assertive form. For example, where did you go? What are you doing? Where what, the WH question what, are is a verb, you is a subject. So what, subject and verb is added in the interrogative form. But in the assertive form, the order of sentence is different. I am teaching. The subject came first, the verb came second. I am a teacher. I am teaching. So the order of the sentence is different in an interrogative and assertive. So we have to change the interrogative into assertive form, and the reporting verb is changed into asked and required. So the reporting verb, we have to use asked or inquired in the indirect speech. For example, he asked, where are you going? In the indirect speech, we write, he asked me where I was going. So we introduce asked or inquired in the indirect form. No conjunction is added. Usually in the assertive form, he said that, he told that, we add that in an indirect speech. But when we write an interrogative sentences into indirect speech, we do not add that in the indirect speech. He said that, he told that we use, but we do not use that, he said that, he asked that. Asked that is wrong. We cannot use that when we change an interrogative sentence into indirect speech. And there is the WH question. The same WH has to be repeated. If there is a what are you doing? He asked me. So I have to repeat the same what in the indirect form also, what I was doing. So same WH has to be repeated. So once again, let us see, comma, quotation marks, question marks are omitted, and interrogative form becomes an assertive form in the indirect speech. Reporting verb, we have to use asked or inquired. No conjunction that is added in the interrogative indirect speech. WH question has to be repeated. If it is an yes or no type of questions, we have to use if or whether. Let's see a few examples. Arun said, what are you doing? Arun asked, there is no that. Arun asked what I was doing. So the same what is repeated in the indirect speech. So whatever may be the WH, we have to repeat the same WH in the indirect form. What are you doing? So here this is the present tense form. We have to change into past tense. As you already have learned, when we change direct into indirect, present tense become past tense form. Change present tense into past tense, and a past tense question we have to change into past perfect form. So this is a present tense, so we have to change into past tense. What are you doing now has become what I was doing, and we have removed the question mark and we have entered the sentence with a full stop. Another example, he said, what is your name? That sentence is again in the present tense form. What is your name? He asked me what, so same what is repeated. What my name was. So soon after what, we have to add subject. Then comes the verb. So in a question form, what takes a verb, then comes the subject here. So in an interrogative form, this is the one. interrogative changes into assertive form. So the question changes into a statement form. What are you doing? What I was doing. What is your name? What my name was. So the question is changed into an assertive form, ending with a full stop. So these are the changes when we change interrogative into indirect speech, changing interrogative sentences into indirect speech. Let's go through a few more examples to get more clarity about this area. As we have already discussed, when we change the present tense into indirect speech, present tense becomes past tense. So here also in the interrogative sentences changing direct into indirect, same rule is followed. We have to change the present into past form. For example, John said to me, how are you? So this is a present tense form. We have to change into past tense, and we have to follow the other rules of changing the interrogative. Asked is added here, and the same WH is repeated, how, and are present tense became past tense and the full stop. So John said to me, how are you? John asked me how I was. She said, where have you gone? She said, where have you gone? So here we have a have. Let's see how do we change it into the indirect speech. She asked me where I had gone. So we change have into had here. So the past form into present form, the present form into past form. WH is repeated the same WH, and the sentence has ended with a full stop. Another example, they said, when do you go home? When do you go home? Here we have a do plus go. When do you go home? So we change that into indirect speech. They asked when I went home. So here you can notice one thing. The do is not repeated in the indirect speech. So if there is a do, does, did in the direct speech, when we change into indirect speech, omit the do, does, did form, and only the main verb, the action verb, will be changed into the past form. So go became went here, and we have removed the do. So they asked when I went home. Do not write when did I go. That did go is equal to went. So the did go became went. So they said, when do you go home? They asked me when I went home. So wherever do plus V1 comes, we have to change the action verb, the main verb, into past form. Let's see a few examples of past tense interrogative sentences. Past tense, as we know, will be changed into past perfect form. Teja said, where did you go yesterday? So did go, that is a past tense interrogative tense sentence. Where did you go yesterday? Teja asked where I had gone the previous day. So did is the past tense. Remember, past tense we have to change it into past perfect tense. So all these examples are past tense question form. We are going to change into past perfect. So did go is the past tense here. We have to change into past perfect had gone. Had V3 is the past perfect. We already know that. So changing did go into past perfect, had gone. Yesterday we have changed into the previous day or the day before, also we can write ending with the full stop. So where did you go? Yesterday became where I had gone the previous day. Another example, I said to her, what were you doing? What were you doing? Were is the past tense here, were doing. We changed it into past perfect form, that is here had been doing, past perfect continuous. I asked her what she had been doing. I said to her, what were you doing? The answer became indirect speech. I asked her what she had been doing. Another example, he said, how did you write the exam? Did write, the past tense interrogative form. He asked how I had written the exam. So did write became had written, past perfect. How did you write the exam? How I had written the exam. So this you is subject here, you change it into I. She asked me, because I am giving the answer. She asked me how I had written the exam. So you became I, did write became had written. Past tense changed into past perfect form. Did go became had gone. Were doing became had been doing. Did write became had written. So change the past tense into past perfect form, and as usual other rules of interrogative changing into assertive are followed. So remember, past tense become past perfect tense when we change the interrogative direct into indirect speech. We have been discussing changing WH questions into indirect speech. Now let us see how do we change the yes or no questions into indirect speech form. In the first category, let's start with do, does, did questions. So the yes or no questions, when we change into indirect speech, we have to introduce if or whether in the indirect speech. We can use either one of these, if or whether, in the indirect form. And do, does questions will take the V2 form in the indirect speech. That means V1 will change into V2 form. And did questions, that is past tense, obviously will be turned into hard V3, past perfect form. So remember this if or whether we add for questions other than WH questions. For WH we have to repeat the same WH word, but for other questions, yes or no type of questions, we have to go for if or whether instead of WH. Let's see a few examples. David said to me, do you like reading novels? David said to me, do. Do you like reading novels? So it's a question started with the do. David asked me if or whether. We can take one of them. David asked me if I liked. Like the V1 changed into liked. If I liked reading novels. So remember, we have not repeated the do here. Do is missing in the indirect form. So instead of do, we have taken if or whether, and like the main verb is changed into past form, like liked. David asked me if I liked reading novels. Full stop. Another example, she said, did you like the novel? So this is a past tense question. Past tense becomes past perfect. Did is going to become hard V3. She asked me if I had liked the novel. So did like now became hard liked. Past tense became past perfect. Present tense became past, simple past. Past tense did like became past perfect, hard V3. If I had liked the novel. 3. Alex said, does he write novels? So here third person singular subject came, so we have used the word does. Alex said, does he write novels? Alex asked if he wrote novels. So the main verb is write, present tense. So present tense becomes past tense verb. So write became wrote. If he wrote novels, full stop. So does write became wrote. Present tense became past tense. Past tense became past perfect, hard V3. Here also present tense became past tense. So yes or no questions will take if or whether in the indirect speech. Yes or no questions starting with shall, will, can, may. They will be converted into would, could, might. Questions starting with the shall, will, can, may will be changed into would, could, might in the indirect speech. Let's see a few examples. I said to him, will you go to Delhi? I said to him, will you go to Delhi? So the indirect speech we are going to change. I asked him if or whether I would go to Delhi. If or whether I would go. So what is the change we have made? Will is changed into would. He asked me if or whether I would go to Delhi. That go is the same, but the will is changed into would. Next, Kiran said, can you speak English? Can is a verb there. Can you speak English? Kiran asked me if I could. So can is changed into could. If I could speak English. Another example, he asked, may I come in? May I come in? He asked me if he might come in. May is changed into might. Let me give you an exercise. Please try to answer. Priya said to me, will you buy this book? Please convert this one into indirect speech. Will you buy this book? Riya asked me. You can try to give me the answer. If or whether. Will is to be changed into would. So Riya asked me if I would buy that book. So the will is going to become would. Riya asked me if I would buy this book, will be changed into this is going to become that. So he asked me if I would buy that book. So here will is changed into would, can became could, may is going to become might, and will becomes would. This is a change of shall, will, can into indirect speech form. Next, let us see a few examples where we are going to change has, have, hard type of questions into interrogative form, into indirect speech. So yes or no questions that starts with has, have, hard, how are we going to change? So as you can see here, the has, have, hard questions, we have to change the interrogative form into indirect speech by changing the has, have into hard form. I said to him, have you written the homework? Have is going to become hard in the indirect speech. I asked him if he had written the homework. So have you written is changed into if he had written the homework. She asked me, has he completed the project? Has he completed the project? Now we are going to change has also into hard form. She asked me if he had completed the project. So here you can see have is changed into hard. Similarly, has also is changed into hard. We have taken have here because of the you have, he has, third person singular, he has he. Next example, the teacher asked, had you completed the exam? So here this is past perfect form, had you completed the exam. Had doesn't have any other form to change, so it will be repeated. So had you completed the exam? The teacher asked me if I had completed the exam. So have and has are changed into had, and had is retained as it is. There is no other change. So if a question starts with the had, we will repeat the same had in the indirect speech also. Had you completed the exam? If I had completed the exam. Full stop. He asked me, have you watched this movie? So you please try to answer this one. He asked me, have you watched this movie? He asked me if or whether. Now try to complete this answer. So here we have the question starting with the have you. So he asked me if or whether I. So have is going to become hard. Have is going to become hard. If or whether I had watched. Have you watched? If I had watched this movie. This movie is going to become that movie. So has and have became hard. Hard will be retained as it is hard only. So have you watched this movie? If or whether I had watched this movie. This is how we change has, have, had into indirect form. Dear students, let us learn how do we change imperative sentences into indirect speech. As you already know, imperative sentences are sentences that convey advices, suggestions, command, request, order, etc. So imperative sentences, law of advice, suggestion, etc. How do we change into indirect form? So it has altogether a different pattern. We had to remember some rules here. The verb we have to change into to infinitive. If you remember, interrogative we changed the verb form into past form. In the interrogative sentences, the verb became past tense form, but in the imperative sentences, the verb changes into to infinitive, that is to plus verb form, and there is no conjunction. There is no that in the indirect speech. Again, reporting verb we are going to change into advised, asked, requested, ordered, commanded, etc. So the reporting verb is going to become advised, asked, etc. There is no that in the indirect form, and the verb is going to become to infinitive. Let's see a few examples now. Tarun said to me, please accept this offer. So this please is a request. So that is an imperative sentence. A request is an imperative sentence. Please accept this offer. How are we going to change into indirect speech? Tarun requested me. So looking at this word please, that is a request. So we are going to use the word requested here. And there is no that here. He requested me to accept. Accept is the verb here. That is now going to become to accept, the to infinitive. So the to infinitive, to plus accept, that is the verb here. Requested me to accept this offer. This offer has become that offer. So Tarun said to me, please accept this offer. So from the meaning of the sentence, you have to know this is an imperative sentence. This is a request. So there is a word please. So immediately what we have to do, change that please into requested. He requested me. So an imperative sentence, we have to change verb into to infinitive form. Accept became to accept. Requested me to accept that offer. Let's see another example. Teacher said, children, study well. What kind of a sentence is this? Children, study well. So it is an advice, right? So since this is an advice, we are going to use the word advised here in the indirect speech. Teacher advised the children to study well. So study well, the verb form, we have changed it into to infinitive, to study well. So since this is an advice, we change it into teacher advised the children study well, change it into to study well. So to infinitive is going to be the part of the indirect speech. Another example, he said to us, don't enter the room. Don't enter the room. So what kind of a sentence is this? This is an order. So in the indirect speech, we have to use ordered. So that is what we are going to write. We have written here. He ordered us. Now, don't, the negative form, don't is changed into not to. Don't becomes not to. Don't doesn't becomes not to. Don't enter the room. He ordered us not to enter the room. To enter. Enter became to enter the room. So here, let's revise once again. The imperative sentences, the verb becomes to infinitive. Imperative sentence means advice, commands, request, suggestion, etc. And there is no that in the indirect speech. We use advice, asked, requested again in the indirect speech, depending on the meaning or the expression of the sentence. So if it is an advice, go for advised. If it is a request, go for requested. If it is an order, go for the word ordered or instructed or suggested, etc. This is how we change imperative into indirect form.